being constructively good, if you like. We move on rapidly to our next guest speaker. He was a visiting teaching fellow at Maktoum College, Dundee, Scotland, in the field of Islamic studies. He's a researcher in Muslim biomedical ethics at the Institute of Ismailiyya Studies here in London. He's the first recipient of the Muhammad Atroun Doctoral Scholarship. In addition to his seminary background, he received his PhD in Islamic Studies from the University of Edinburgh. His fields of study are philosophical theology, philosophy of religion, political theology, and modern Islam and modern ethics. Please kindly welcome Dr. Yaser Mirdamadi in a warm manner.
Thank you very much. So the title of my presentation is Can Apologetics be Defended Pluralistically? Quote unquote, together but different seems a desirable motto. Still, the difficult question is whether or not peaceful and durable coexistence is possible despite communities being significantly and radically different in a diverse society. Maybe it is possible, but only if the tensions are dealt with. I will address one among many tensions between togetherness and radical differences. The previous respectable guest speaker addressed the possibilities and capabilities of Muslim cultures or religious identities to get engaged in a togetherness but different kind of coexistence. So without denying that possibilities and capabilities, I'm gonna address the tensions just to have a kind of more comprehensive picture of multiculturalism, its possibility or difficulties. So I will address one among many tensions between togetherness and radical differences, specifically between actively maintaining a religious identity and the requirements of a culturally pluralistic approach. My presentation, therefore, is a philosophical exercise in identity politics. To characterize the tension between togetherness and difference, let me clarify the key terms involved. William Lane Craig, birth 1949, still around and very active, an American analytic philosopher of religion and Christian apologist, defines apologetic as, quote, that branch of Christian theology which seeks to provide a rational justification. I'm sure that Professor Shermer is not happy with the word justification because he's anti-justificationist. I'm just quoting. A rational justification for the truth claims of the Christian faith, end quote. The quotation is from Reasonable Faith, 3rd ed., page 15. Okay. By extension, one can talk of Muslim apologetics when a theologian defends the truth claims of the Islamic faith, or Jewish apologetics one can talk of when a theologian defends the truth claims of the Jewish faith, and so on and so forth. So apologetics has traditionally been an exclusivist enterprise. William Lane Craig, whom I've just cited, is a famous case in point. I mean, he has some debates with some Muslims arguing that Islam is quote unquote a distorted kind of monotheism, but Christianity is quote unquote a complete form of monotheism. So that is the typical way of exclusivist apologetics, as he is. William Lane Craig defends the exclusive truth claims of Christianity against all other religious traditions, especially other Abrahamic traditions of Islam and Judaism. By cultural pluralism, I mean an identity, a religious or racial or sexual or linguistic, etc. identity, retaining its core identity-based communities within a multicultural society without, on the one hand, quote, the penalties of loss of status, educational, social, or political disenfranchisement, end quote. And on the other hand, each identity-based community participates in a wider societal good. Simply put, cultural pluralism is a formulation of a together but different aspirational society. And the quotation was from a classical article by Pantoja, Perry, and Blorock, entitled Towards the Development of Theory, Cultural Pluralism Redefined in the Journal of Sociology and Social Welfare, 1976, page 126. So please do not get lost into the details. I'm trying to define my key terms just to clarify them, not definition in the necessary and sufficient components kind of defining, just in the manner of clarifying what I mean by them. So I define apologetics, I define cultural pluralism. Then I'm gonna address the tension between the two. Okay, so but societies with multiple identity-based communities are far from this ideal society, aspirational society, in which people maintain or retain their distinct identities, but at the same time, they contribute to the common good within the fabric of that society. The dominant anti-plural culture in such a society demands assimilation, and the minority groups tend to take an isolationist approach towards the dominant culture. The situation is marked in such a society by competition and mutual misunderstanding rather than cooperation and mutual understanding. Though these tensions are to be analyzed historically, sociologically, regionally, and so on and so forth, philosophical analysis is also a desideratum. I'm putting this sentence because sometimes regional factors are the key. I mean, for example, in Sunni-Shi'i conflict, which is an unfortunate event, phenomenon, not an event, sometimes regional factors are more important than going back to the early history of Islam. So in order to not to make something which has more concrete causes rather than abstract causes, I had to mention that historical, sociological, regional analysis are necessary, but also in order not to make something which has a kind of theoretical background also unnecessarily concrete, we have to address it also philosophically. Okay, religious or otherwise identities could be a source of the common good. Therefore, defending an identity in the form of apologetics is in principle an intellectually and socially viable enterprise. Some identity proponents have gone so far as to argue that without well-established valuable identities, democracy is doomed to failure. So, quote again, without identity, a democracy becomes incapable of defending even the values it holds most dear, end quote. The quotation is from an Israeli activist called Nathan Sharansky, defending identity, its indispensable role in protecting democracy, 2008, page 6. Okay, this contrasts with those approaches that take theological apologetics as obsolete and even obscurantist enterprise that is at best useless and at worst a source of conflict in an already enough polarized society. Also, this objection, I'm going to address this objection against apologetics. We are enough polarized, we are enough different, we do not need theological apologetics to add to an already saturated and already enough polarized situation. Also, this objection, so this anti-apologetics objection, is not strong enough to render identities worthless or dangerous across the board. I think it has a grain of truth. To address this objection, anti-apologetics objection, I will focus on religious identity, specifically Abrahamic religions, as I'm more familiar with them. So identities are cannot only be reduced or limited to the religious identities. We also have a kind of, I don't know, philosophical apologetics, far right, far left apologetics, political apologetics. I'm not going to address them. I'm talking about theological apologetics and religious identities here. Before addressing the objection, it is worth mentioning that if a religious tradition is reinterpreted pluralistically, then the tension with which we are dealing here, i.e. the tension between religious truth claims and cultural pluralism, does not arise. Religious pluralism is a view that all world religions are equally contain truth. This contrasts with hard religious exclusivism, which says only one religion reflects the truth and all other religions are false. That was the hard religious exclusivism. Soft religious exclusivism, better known as inclusivism, takes a middle position between pluralism and hard exclusivism, to the effect that although one religion contains the whole truth, other religions, as far as they have similar truths, are partially true. It is fair to add that although Abrahamic religious traditions, including Islam, have been reinterpreted pluralistically, they are usually understood exclusively, either hard exclusivism or soft exclusivism, inclusivistic. And the tension between religious truth claims and cultural pluralism, if you take exclusivistic approach, would arise. This tension can be augmented if the separation between private, public, and political spheres is blurred or diminished. If a religious identity has an
you can try to conclude.
I'm towards the end. Can you give me a few more minutes, please?
Yes.
If a religious identity has an exclusive share of divine truth and monopolizes political power, cultural pluralism is nowhere to be found. This is the case with religious political fundamentalism. But the tension remains deep down unsolved, even with religious political quietists. They may not take over politics, but how can one fully participate in a multicultural and pluralistic society if, for example, one thinks that only Muslims go to heaven? Let me conclude with some suggestions regarding the status of apologetics in a multicultural and pluralistic society. Even if we take this position, to which I am inclined, that, but I cannot argue for it here, that religious exclusivism does not square with cultural pluralism, still apologetics, which is usually an exclusivistic enterprise, can be, under certain conditions, be a useful enterprise, sometimes even a desideratum. How so? Let me illustrate this point with an anecdote, and then I will end it here. Few Iranian poets and men of literature, including prominent poet, Iranian poet, called Mehdi Akhavan Salis, 1929 to 1990, once privately met Abdul Hussein Amini, 1902 till 1970, known as Allama Amini, the author of the well-known compendium called Al-Ghadir fil Kutubi wa Sunnati wal Adab, literally means event of Ghadir. Just for the start, Ghadir is when Prophet Muhammad, according to Shi'i interpretation, appointed Ali as successor, and according to the Sunni interpretation, emphasized how Ali is close to him. So the event, they agreed that happened, but they have different interpretations. Anyway, event of Ghadir in the book and tradition and literature. Amini was a Shi'i jurist, hadith scholar, theologian, historian. Akhavan Salis, himself a secular Shia, protests Amini that why have you wasted your time writing an 11 volumes Al-Ghadir compendium just to engage in a long overdue Ali versus Umar's quarrel. Amini has been reported as responding that it is not about Ali versus Umar's quarrel or conflict. I wrote this compendium because they, I mean, it's very vague who he's referring to, but they take us Shias as nothing. I tried to prove that we Shias have had rich literature and multi-layered history that can neither be ignored nor denied. I think there is a profound insight behind the short response of Allama Amini. That insight can be formalized as far as our purpose is concerned this way. Apologetics can be used to delineate the contributions of a specific identity to the wider common good. In this sense, if not in any other sense, apologetics can be defended pluralistically. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Profound topic. I think you needed a lot more time, Doctor, but alas, in programs like this, we have limited time, and it makes it very difficult for someone in my position to chair it, because